daf is Lamed Tes, but we're going to continue with Lamed Ches a little bit, which we were a little bit. That was there's some big sugyas here, and we'll try and just touch on it a little bit. So the Mishnah said, and this is a Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. The Mishnah said, "Shemeres yavam shenafel lo nechasim." A shemeres yavam. I mean, someone whose husband died, but she didn't have yibum yet. So she's in between.
What?
Sylvia, I'm going to mute you and unmute yourself if you need something. So shemeres yavam shenafel lo nechasim. She can sell her own properties. So really, we have to know that there are three types of properties. Want a heater? There are three types of properties. Three types of properties that a person, that a woman has in or assets that a woman has in the field. She has the ksuba, which is owed to her, and that's a shibud that's specifically dependent on some things, some achrayis. He has to die first, or divorce her. There's specific stipulations that it will come from certain types of fields and only from certain types of assets. So that's ksuba. Then there her assets that she brings into the marriage. There are two types of ways that she can bring it in. There's nichse tzon barzel, and nichse tzon barzel is where the asset belongs to the husband essentially, and he can do whatever he wants with it. And at the end of the marriage, either whenever the ksuba would come as well, so the end of the marriage is going to be a chiyuv of him returning the field as is. So that value is returned. That's nichse tzon barzel. So it sort of locks the asset in its value to her, but it doesn't lock in the asset in its usage. She can use the field. He can use the field and sell it and buy it and lease it, and he can do whatever he wants with it. She just has the value of what she brought in. That's nichse tzon barzel. And then there's which essentially would be just nechasim, her nechasim, and then there's nechasim hanechnasim v'yotzim. Nechasim, assets that she brings in, nechnasim v'yotzim, I'll leave with her, and this is called nichse malug. And essentially, for this, she maintains the ownership of the asset itself, of the real property. He has the rights to legally called the fructus, what the payers, the value that comes out of that, so the rent and the produce that comes from it. Payers in Lashon Gemara, fructus in what? I think in legal terms, they call it fructus. Yeah, the whatever the fruits of the produce is of this field. So now the Mishnah says that if she's shemeres yavam and then she inherits a field, so it sounds like this: nechasim shenafel lo nechasim. She can sell it, buy it, she can do anything. If she inherits during that time, it's completely hers. Mesa, however, if she dies. So what do you do with the ksuba and with the nichse malug? So these are the assets that are really hers, and he only had rights. The husband had rights to use it and to benefit from it, but it's really her asset. So Beishamei Omrim Yachloiku. Beishamei say there's a split. Who does it split between? Yorshei Habal, the husband, meaning the Yevomos. Last week we talked about it could be Yorshei Habal of the deceased husband, Yorshei Habal, the Yevomos Yorshim, or Yorshei Ha'av, her father, meaning her relatives. Her what? Heirs. Her heirs, yeah, her relatives. There's a yachloiku, a split, and a bis hillel nechasim b'chaskasam. Everything nechasim is in his own chazaka. The question is, what does this chazaka mean? and which nechasim is this talking about? Ksuba becheskas Yerusha. Baal, the ksuba is in the property or in the chazaka of the husband, of the deceased husband or the yavam, and chasim and chasim yezim becheskas Yerusha, her relatives. Now, what about nichsei tzem barzel? So, in Tosfos over here, there's a whole lengthy discussion about this. It's unclear how to read these words of nechasim b'cheskasam. This in the Mishnah, when the Mishnah said nechasim b'cheskasam, the nechasim are in their chazaka. Is that talking about nichsei tzem barzel, and it's a separate halacha? We have the ksuba goes to his family. The nichsei malug go to her family, and the nichsei tzem barzel, the nechasim, the assets that she brought in and he was using, b'cheskasam, they remain in their chazaka. And then, if it does mean that, what does b'cheskasam mean? So this is this lengthy Tosfos. It's just a point of that it's not so clear, but the way some Rishonim learn that the taich is simply like this: nechasim b'cheskasam, all the nechasim remain where they are. That's like a heading, such as the ksuba remains with the husband's family because it was never obligated to pay, and the nechsei malug stay with her family because after all, the asset was always hers and never was not hers. So everything is b'cheskasam. And then the question is, so what about nichsei tzem barzel? So really, in understanding nichsei tzem barzel, there's two ways, a machlekes really between the Pnei Yeshua and Avnei Miluim, in understanding the nichsei tzem barzel. How do we view this? Because essentially, it's not her asset the whole time. It's the field, the property really belongs to the husband throughout the marriage. That's what it is. It's yours. Do whatever you want with it. And you owe me that value at the end of the marriage. So how do we look at this? Do we see it as a really like a ksuba obligation? You brought in this amount of money into the marriage, so I owe it to you at the end. And if that's the case, then the Mishnah lists it. It already says ksuba, and this is really the same as ksuba. Whatever the ksuba is, the ksuba it goes to his heirs because after all it is his chazaka. So Mela, she died before the resolution of the marriage because, as we said, the mace, the nifter, his marriage passed on to the brother, to the yavam, and she died before that ended. So Memela Koreves Hillel. The brother maintains, the yavam maintains the rights to the asset and doesn't have to pay it, and that's what nechasim b'cheskasam would mean. It is in his possession. No, it's not talking about tzem barzel. This is the title. Nechasim b'cheskasam, all nechasim stay where they are. Yeah, all nechasim stay where they are. And well, I don't know if the Avnei Miluim is going to say it's really included in ksuba, because it's the same as ksuba. However, the Pnei Yeshua says that no, at the end, really the husband has to be yorish the tzem barzel from her. Really, he owes it to her, and he's yorish it back. And in this case, the yavam shouldn't be the one yorish it; it should be her family to be yorish it. So the way the Pnei Yeshua learns is that every time a wife dies before a husband, so the husband doesn't owe her the ksuba and yorish it back. It's just that's a part of the ksuba. Ksuba is if she outlives the marriage, either by divorce or death, so then he owes the ksuba. But in this case, he doesn't owe the ksuba because because she died first. So it's not like he owes her the ksuba and then inherits it back. But the Pnei Yeshua says that's different in Nechsitzam Basil. In Nechsitzam Basil, he owes her the money, and then he's going to have to earn it back. And then there's questions about it's roi kabamuchsuk, it's not money that she properly has, so why are her heir is getting this? And so but that's a machlokes between Pnei Yeshua and the Avnei just in the understanding of what is the structure of Nechsitzim Basil. So again, Nechsi Malug, that's always her asset, so it remains by her family. The Nechse, the Ksuba is an obligation to her, remains by his family, and then Nechsitzim Basil, it's unclear. Definitely there's a machlekes over here of whether it's like Ksuba, that he never really owes it to her, because like Ksuba, only if she outlives the marriage, so she gets it, so he never had to pay it. Or we say no, he's in debt to her. She has this chayv outstanding to her, and therefore it should go to her family. So the Gemara asks, what's pshat in the machlokes Beisham and Hillel? And really, the Gemara asks it as a stira from the Reish and the Sefer. In the beginning, we say that whatever she inherits during the Shemeres Yavim time, she can do any work she wants with it. She can buy, she can sell, she can do anything. It's hers. Meaning she's not yet married, and yet over here we talk about the husband inheriting, according to Beishamai, 50-50. What's pshat? So there are a few pshatim in the Gemara. One, the Gemara says that it's talking about, Ula says that it's talking about in Arusa, that she wasn't really married to the first, not really, she was really married, but only with Kiddushin, not with Chuppah, to the first husband. And so since the first husband didn't have a proper Kiddushin, a proper marriage, full marriage, it was only Kiddushin and not Chuppah, and not Nesuin, and therefore she has the rights, whatever she inherits, to buy and sell. And really that would be the same for that the husband would inherit her. The Seifa, which says that Beishamai says that the husband has a right to inherit, in the whole Shiloh of Beishamai Hillel, in what? That's talking about by Nesuin. The language in the Gemara and in Rashi is, the Gemara calls this a suffix. Rashi explains over here in Amud Aleph that this suffix is that correct. Yeah, correct. But what does it mean, a suffix? Like, why is it? What's the suffix here? So, how do you learn?
I just learned that it's just the Sika, and therefore we don't who's actually Yarshim the property.
So you're learning like Rashi,
Yeah,
which is good. Yeah, that what would you say?
No, I didn't understand. I'm very confused by the terminology of suffix. Like, what's the suffix? Like,
Right, Rashi.
It's like a lower level. What's suffix?
Rashi's right. Rashi doesn't learn like it's a real suffix. Rashi says the suffix here is an Amud Aleph. It's like shazu suffix nesui. It's like
It's a little less.
right. It's a lesser degree.
And then, like,
Right.
when we start using the halakha v'achloku, which usually comes from a suffix, like.
It's a borrowed term here.
Our term say it has the co-op of a suffix, meaning it's equal to.
It's the equivalent of a suffix because it's right.
Well, as far as inheritance, that's where the suffix really comes into play, and that's why you divide it.
So look at the second to last line of Rashi on Amud Aleph, in Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Hacha mishum the suffix arusahi, da agida bei, v'lav ifte ishte mamashi. So Rashi says a suffix is not a doubt. Rather, the meaning of suffix over here is that it's a midway. It's somewhere in between. The suffix over here doesn't mean doubt. It means midway. She's connected to him, but not yet married to him. See that, Rashi? So Rashi here is giving us a new geder in Suffolk, in defining what this space is. It's like it's an in-between, and that's what it means in Suffolk. However, in Amid Beis, by Zika Sarusa, it's a little harder. The way Rashi says it in this third narrow line. The Gabi Nechasim ein le shum koyach behem, v'nimtza shezika sarusa eina klum, kari lo safek arusa. Since the Zika is not strong enough to do anything, so we call it a suffix. Why is it a suffix? Can't do anything. It's certainly nothing, but the lematzi lameimar kasavu lazika sarusa eina klum. You can't say it's nothing. The habay chalitza. Right, so here we have this unique thing. Rashi has, instead of suffix, Rashi has a term of like somewhere, it's a partial something. I don't know what it is. So before Rashi says it's partial because there's a zika agida bay, right, a zika, but not his wife. Here he says it's really nothing, but you still have an obligation of chalitza. The chiyuv chalitza itself is enough to say, look. There's something there. So the problem is going to come in the next Gemara, because in the next Gemara, the Gemara goes into suffix and vadai ain't suffix. Might be the vadai is suffix. It's suffix, and according to Rashi, we're not talking about suffix at all. We're not talking about a suffix. We're not talking about a vadai. We're talking about a lower degree, a lesser degree of marriage. Yeah?
It's a lesser degree of marriage than the suffix on the custom.
Yeah, but that's not the vada is not more or less. So Rashi does that, right? Rashi flips it from suffix and vada into more muhzik and less muhzik. Who has a greater muhzakas in the karkois here, in the rights here, right? So that's where Rashi flips suffix of vadai into muhzak and ein muhzak, and Rashi behechreach has to say that because Rashi, there is no suffix according to Rashi, not a suffix. When we say ein suffix mitzvah vadai, you for sure have an argument. I don't have an argument, so I'm a suffix. I'm something maybe not. You know for sure. So how can my doubt change your vadai? But over here, there's none of that. Because according to Rashi, there's just a lesser degree of marriage, a greater degree of marriage, but there's no vadai and suffix here. So Rashi is mefarish that we're not talking about that at all. We're talking about muhzakas. Seifa haylo mesa halalu bayim metayim mikoyach Yerusha, vayobim tayim mikoyach Yerusha. Yokach shneim suffix. None of them, right? They're both a suffix, meaning none of them are a muhzik. They're both saying, I have a right to get it, but I don't have it. That's a suffix, The zika kiknusa en kan yosher av klum. Shabal yerish. And if Zika is not, so then they are Yorish. So each one is tining a Yorish. Seifa. It's equivalent to the third wide line. So Rashi here says that when we talk about over here, suffix, a vadai, it's dealing with who is a muhsik. And both Yorshim, the suffix is a din in, I don't have a muhzakas here. So that's an important change in the sugya, because according to Rashi, we're not dealing with any doubts. However, yeah, Max, yeah, the Rashba, Ritva, they learn that it's a doubt. And what's the doubt? It's a doubt in will he do the yibum? It's in the state of suffix because I don't know if he's going to do the yibum. So it's the zika sarusa is a suffix. And the Nesua is a suffix. It's a suffix because I don't know if it's going to end up becoming an Nesua.
why would one be more suffix than one?
No, they're not more. They're not more suffix. Both of them are going to be a suffix. Zika Sarusa.
In a way, they're more. But if
It's a suffix Nesua.
right,
It's also going to be a suffix Nesua. That's what the Gemara is saying. It's going to be.
What about Mimer?
Okay, Mimer is the next Gemara, Alamed test, right? The machiluk of whether Mimer is the chiluk or not. He says Mimer is not enough. Mimer is the Rabbanan thing. I still don't know if he's going to.
be a true suffix.
No, because I still don't know whether he's going to do Yibum. Yibum is the only true marriage here.
Does the Rashba say that the suffix, the actual suffix of confusion that maybe you go or maybe you want to he applies that to Mimer also or only on the on
He doesn't apply it to Mimer. That's the next Gemara. He's in Ula. He's saying right on this.
Right, because with Rabba in Mimer, they say that they could suffix Erison but about
Right.
So they're like they're more different.
Maybe he learns that he's going to learn that that tells me that's push it the suffix for me that he's going to take over the marriage completely. I'd have to see the Rashi. I don't remember how he learns that shtick.
So what's the real difference between the suffix Rosa and the suffix Nesua? Seems like there has to be a difference if we're going to break up the Mishnah Rishon and Sefer and say one's Nesua, one's Rusua. What's the practical difference between the two? Why is one higher?
So the Rashi was learning that it's higher because he had a proper marriage. He had a valid marriage, so his chus is stronger.
Any suffix right? I mean,
There is a greater koyach of Yerusha for the.
But is there really a greater cut for the guy to do Yibum?
No, and more. How does he touch up suffix Evadai and suffix Meisimid Evadai? So when do we say in suffix Meisimid Evadai? I can't prove myself. You can prove yourself. You have an argument. I don't. So it is in suffix Meisimid Evadai. So they ask of the Rashba. It's very nice. If we're talking about a suffix, if something happened, I can't prove it. But if it's up to me to finish up and do it, right? So what are you going to tell the Yavam? Well, it's a suffix whether you're going to do Yibum. Give me a minute. I'll be patient the suffix for you. What the Gemara is saying you can't be Irish because we don't even know whether you're going to do Yibum. All right. So let's take the time, patient the suffix, do the Yibum, and we're done. We're going to paskin a monetary thing now when it's beyond to change the suffix.
They still need to know.
No, when the time of the meaning the question is first of all in the Reisha not right in the Reisha we're talking about her being Yerush and we're saying what's the chiluk between the Reisha and the Sefer? The Reisha she gets to keep it because she's a suffix and a vadai. She's a vadai. She's a vat. Not a muchzik. Rashi was right. So what's going on? He can just consummate it. He could just be pushing the suffix. And even for her, every zika, what he's saying that it's a suffix. Every zika is a suffix, whether or not he's going to be pushed. He's going to do yibum. It's something that's we're about to find out.
You still need to decide who owns the property in between. Even if it's 5 minutes or 1 day or whatever the amount of time is, there still needs to be.
Doesn't he have to wait 3 months?
For whatever time it is, the point is that it's made to be completed. He's about to do that, whenever it is.
No, also the 3 months is like a
Fine, but Lamaisi, he's saying Lamaisi doesn't have a way to complete it now. So wait, don't be patient the suffix.
And that kind of like he's the other to do it.
Yeah,
tell me, but I can't do it now because you won't let me. Like, I'll do it. Like,
right, but even without, I mean, just it's not. It's a very hard suffix to say suffix whether or not you're going to do it. So let's wait. Let's leave the money in limbo. Yeah, no, but if you learn, let me explain the Rashba again. The Rashba says, really, the Rashba says it's a suffix whether he's going to do Yibum or not. Meaning, if he ends up doing Yibum, really, the money already during Shomeres Yavam is his. Not Lemafreya, it should be his. It's just we don't know if he's going to do. Maybe he's going to do chalitza, and then it won't be his. But if he ends up doing yibum, then it's his. That's the way to learn a suffix. What's a suffix? That's a suffix. Suffix meaning I don't know if you're going to end up doing yibum or not. If he ends up doing yibum, that proved that the zika was a solid zika from the beginning, and he inherited the kedushin from the deceased brother. Well, then, if that's enough to make him the bailim, so then let's wait and see if he'll do that. Rashi is not saying since you didn't have yibum yet, therefore it's hers, because that's not suffix. That's an uptight, right? That's more like Rashi saying what?
Saying that she shouldn't be allowed to sell the stuff in case he's going to do yibum.
Yeah.
She will turn out not to have his speech to her.
Yeah. The Rashi was saying she has a right to sell it because it's a suffix if he's going to do it. Wait, hold off. Give me a moment, and I'll do it.
What?
Yeah.
Why isn't the suffix whether or not there's even a mitzvah yibum at all?
Sorry?
Meaning, why is the suffix not whether there's even a mitzvah yibum at all? Meaning, maybe in 3 weeks it'll turn out she's pregnant, and then there is no mitzvah yibum.
That's not a real suffix because we don't have a reason to assume that there's a child. Only once she's pregnant is there a suffix. That's what we saw in the previous sugyas, that if she was pregnant, so we have a reason to assume there's a suffix. Maybe there's going to be a ben kayama. But without knowing of a pregnancy, you don't have to assume there's right now, you're childless. So that's only midarabanan to wait. Charlie was asking, why is that shemeres yavam? If really, the way we understand, if we understand the Rashba in the simplest way, so what that means is really he inherited the marriage right away, and he has the schusim and the karka right away. It's only that, right now we don't know whether he's going to do yibum or not. So she can buy and sell because she's a vadai, he's a suffix. So what kind of shemeres yavam is that? It's essentially, if he does yibum from the first minute, she was really married to him. She was passed on the kiddush. To word it differently, we know the halacha is that a shemeres yavam that marries someone else, the kedushin is chal. It's just a lav. If he were to do yibum, but how did you decide that it's only a lav? Maybe if he would end up doing yibum, then it would be what is the status of shemeres yavam that he can later define what the status is right now? It's a hard rashba, but it is, you say this in this understanding of the sugya. The Gemara says that. So what is the machlekes of Vehibes Hil B'Shamai about whether or not it's a suffix in vadai or vadai and vadai, or the way Rashi learns a muchzuk, right? Whether both are muchzakim or not. So Rashi says that based on the Gemara says that kala oimid ligvos kagavodami, shtara oimid ligvos kagavodami. If you have a shtar, a document, a loan document that's oimid ligvos, it's meant to be. It's meant to be collected on, paid, right? So you're about to collect on it. So Mamela, it's kagavid. I mean, that's what Bisham is saying. So he's also a muchzik already. And Misila says no, it's not a muchzik because it's not kagavid. I mean, it's not like it's collected. Now, in certain things, we say the halacha is kalaimid ligbas kagavid. We say that halacha on something. So what's pshat that we would paskin like Beishamai? This is a question that the Achrayim asked. The Tzais brings it in Siman Yud Beis, and he asks like this: in Kenkiva, the time of the mechila of Tafar Shtar and Mahani Hainimishim the Kolay Midligaves Kagavadami. Since we say mechila doesn't work, whatever these halachas are that don't work on the basis of Kala Oimid Ligbas Shtar, that's a loan document that is about to be collected on. It's as if it's collected on, so you already have the asset. So Huh?
Mechila for what?
Mechila for a star and various halachas.
That the wonder can't be lawful?
In certain cases, right? Mechila doesn't need a kinyan. Mechila is already a mechila, whether because a kala imid. If I'm holding the star, so it's as if I already have it. So then I can. So it's imid ligvais. If it's imid ligvais, so mela the mechila is like I'm gifting it. Otherwise, it's not biyadi. How can I even be meichel? It's not ba'ilam. Anyhow, so he says, we hold not like Beshamai. So he brings that the machlokes over here is not whether kol oimid ligvos kagavigama. That's true. Kol oimid ligvos is kagavigama, but only in a vadai. Over here, it's a suffix. We don't know whether he's going to be able to be good with this or not. That's where it's a question, right? Beis Shammai say that even in a suffix, kol oimid ligvos kagavigama. I mean, that's what it says from the Knesset Gdolah. The besafik levad loy have a kagavli. Avo b'shtar barur have a kagavli. So reading this Gemara, you can get the impression that Beishamai hold kala emid ligvais kagavli. Bishil hold kala emid ligvais lav kagavli. But it's not true. It's only in this case where there is a doubt of whether they have a right to this gavia in bichlal. Okay. No, this is the Bachayt. Right? This is a Bachayt. The Ksuba could be similar, right? But this is the Bachayt may or may not have the opportunity to be given from him. And so Mamela, it's a suffix. All right, let's jump ahead to some of this stuff. An interesting, so the Gemara goes through 4 explanations, and then the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, "Kansa harehi ki'ishta l'chalda." The Mishnah said, after he did Yibum, this Yevama is his wife in all matters. Which matters is that Lamaisa? One, that you do not need you don't need a get. You don't need a chalitza. Only a get. If he wants to divorce her, say he married her, did Yibum, 3 years later, it's not working out, he wants to divorce her. She just needs a get. She doesn't need chalitza. Even though that it started with a Yibum, you don't need chalitza. It's his wife for everything. That's halacha number 1. Halacha number 2, that after he divorces her, if he wants, he can remarry her. Because the halacha is that machzir grishas is allowed to bring back. In fact, there's a mitzvah to remarry, for a man to remarry his wife after he divorced her. Shmuel Rozovsky is one of the famous ones. He was married to the daughter of Hirsch Pesach Frank, divorced her, and he was Mekayim that mitzvah. It's not so common that people get to be Mekayim the mitzvah of what?
We hope not.
No. Machzir grishas. Mitzvah machzir grishas. But it's not what we strive for. Like the Heshiv is Akzela, right? It's just like
I should say like you can help someone else. I just feel help someone else.
yeah.
But as an yeshiva, there's a couple in Chicago that got divorced from the Shasa. They got married. They went to Witz and had the wedding in Witz. And had like in the base marriage. But they started after they kicked that man out from Chicago. So now it's being in the building. It was like a very quick, like it just happened and no one knew yet.
There's a lot of mitzvahs there's a lot of mitzvahs that we don't try not to even Yibum. I mean, Yibum chalitza. It's one you open never, you never need. Anyhow, so machzir grishas. So Rashi says that you learn them from the same limud. You learn them from the same pasuk that v'laka loy leisha v'yibma. It's they're both his. So Rav Nachman Batzavitz here asked a kasha. Says, let's think about it. What's pshat that you would think that he would need chalitza? He would. Why would there be a need of chalitza? He married her. So why would there be a need of chalitza?
Because if he no longer wants to keep the yibum, then the option is good.
I understand, meaning that
The chalitza was from this yibum relationship.
meaning it's still a din yibum, it's still a mitzvahs yibum, right?
Sure.
Mitzvahs yibum still applies.
I mean, to be fair, Suda still lives in the first, right?
Comes from the assets, but
Suda still connects to the original thing, like doesn't.
But not-
Him, but doesn't it?
he also has a chrayas. We see that some of it's going to come from him, right? If
Only
there's no assets, whatever, however.
Give her to help her out, whatever it is. But like
The initial
that's, one could hear it, right? I'm just saying, like one could hear that, like the original marriage is really the original, like it's
For sure, the original marriage is the original marriage,
So the
but-
belief is still in
but not mitzvahs yibum still apply. But let's say mitzvahs yibum still applies. So what's the havamina to say?
Well, it's also, if not, there's
What do you
The Havamina with the Zerus Chassid, right?
that?
That he still has the status of a young on and that he will be like he's gonna split with it. Isn't that what he said? Well, we'll see what you said Yibma, or Ramana, the guy, the original, we got what?
Yeah. What would that mean? What would that mean? That means that the yibum, Mrs. Yibum is still there. Fine. What?
Would we be worried at all that if he doesn't, maybe a Halloween, if he doesn't do chalitza, that people will be concerned about Erva, about the issue of Erva?
Meaning it would be a derabanan of a like a gzeir shema or a marasayim. We're looking first at the deraisa. You're right. Maybe there's a derabanan thing as well, but we're looking at the deraisa. What's the deraisa chiyuv? But the problem, Rav Nachman asks Akasha, he says, wait, what? So if that's the case, that the mitzvah yibum is still alive, so why would you think that there's an isser of machzor gerushasa? Machzor gerushasa would mean, why can't he remarry her? Oh, you can't remarry her. It's your deceased brother's wife. It's Eishes Ach. If there's an isser Eishes Ach, then there's no mitzvah yibum. If there would be a chiyuv, if there would be an isser of erva, of Eishes Ach, why in the world would you think that there's a mitzvah yibum? There's no mitzvah yibum by an erva. And from the fact that you think that there's a mitzvah yibum, that would tell me that there's no erva. So how can Rashi say we're learning them from the same place? After all, if that's the case, it's either or. These two svaras seem to be counter, meaning mamanavshach. I do need a limit for both. Meaning I need to tell you that it's not an Eishes Ach, so you're allowed to take it back. And if it's not an Eishes Ach, maybe you need yibum. No, I have to tell you you need chalitza. No, I have to tell you don't need chalitza. But you can't learn them both from the same pasuk because they're contradictory. That's the way. So there are two basic mahalchim in the Terutzim here. Menachem has one of them. The famous Reb Chaim is, Reb Chaim says that even though, what in the yeshivas they call Eishes Ach de Mamela, every erva exempts you from mitzvah yibum. A wife's sister, whatever, all the ervas exempt from yibum. There's one that does it, because the mitzvah yibum is by that. That's Eishes Ach. So what happens if I have a way that the Eishes Ach, the Isser erva, is not in a case of yibum? Will that become a that's called Eishes Ach de Mamela? It's Eishes Ach not in the mitzvah, Eishes Ach alone. Like this case, after this is a prime example. Let's say he divorces her, and now it goes back to being the deceased brother's wife. Maybe there's no mitzvah yibum anymore. Why is there no mitzvah yibum? Because there's an erva. Why is it an erva? Because it's your brother's wife. And even though that the first time around there was his brother's wife, there was a mitzvah to do yibum, so that's not going to pater you. But now that there's no mitzvah yibum anymore because you did that already, So maybe now this erva patches you. So Rechaim says no. And there's many rayas to this idea of Eishes Achdam Amela. That if all ervas exempt you of Yibum besides for one erva. Eishes Ach never exempts you, even if it's not in a mitzvah. Even though we saw Eishes Ach Shaloi mitzvah would exempt you, right? But there's a difference. Eishes Achdam Amela, when it happened where it wasn't, it didn't. It's not a stira to the mitzvah. Okay, that's a. Or Menachem says, right? It once was a mitzvah.
And now the mitzvah is done, but there's no mitzvah anymore, but it's still not an erva
That will exempt you of the mitzvah. And that's why I thought maybe you'd need chalitza. Maybe you're not allowed to remarry. You're not allowed to do machzor grusha, but you need chalitza because there's still a yibum. Menachem says it differently. So we learned earlier that kol she'eino oila liyibum, eino oila chalitza. Everything, if there's no zika for a yibum, there's no chalitza. So by every erva, there's no zika for yibum, so there's no chalitza. The Gemara says in Daf Chav, in one mahalach of why by erva, right? So it says you can't say there's a mitzvah yibum because there's erva. So if there's no yibum, there's no chalitza either. Since that's nice when you actually have eino oila yibum, but you can't say over here by machzor grusha say eino oila yibum. He already did yibum. So you can't say there's no mitzvah chalitza. So it's true it's an erva, but there's a mitzvah chalitza. So what Rabbi Nachman is saying is normally we think that if by a yibum, by a yevama, if it's an erva, there's no mitzvah chalitza. Why is there no mitzvah chalitza by an erva? Because there's no yibum, there's no zika. Says I found for you an erva, potentially, right? It's not true, but that's why we need a limud. But because I could have said we have an erva, but you can't tell me there's no mitzvah, there's no obligation chalitza, because we already have a mitzvah yibum. It was oila liyibum. If it's oila liyibum, there's a chiyuv chalitza, even though that it's an erva. That's the way Rabbi Nachman said it.
How's it ever oila liyibum?
It was already because they did yibum. Right? This is somebody who divorced after yibum, so you can't tell me it's not oila yibum. He actually, not only is it oila yibum, he actually did yibum. So you can't tell me, oh, ain't oila yibum, ain't chalitza. Once he did yibum, perhaps now chalitza is a part of the recipe. That's why I need a special yibum, even though that I may have thought that it's an error. So that's how it's shaykh to learn both, and that's why the same limud is going to tell me it doesn't need chalitza. It's really a wife, doesn't need chalitza, and it is a leave.
Why would you think that she needs chalitza? Why is there how many chalitza?
Correct. It's either you say that you need chalitza, or you say that she's an erva. It wouldn't seem to go together. All right. Hop into. Let's go to Amud Beis. The sugya brings up over here which one is. The Mishnah says that the mitzvah of yibum is greater than the mitzvah chalitza, and we have at first b'rishono miskaven l'shem mitzvah. This is in the middle of the daf. Achshav shem miskaven l'shem mitzvah amru mitzvah chalitza kedemas mitzvah yibum. Amar Rav ein koifin, and Rav said we don't force him to do it. Yasa kamad Rav amalahu iboyis chalitza iboyis yaveh. B'didach tal rachmana. You can do whichever you want. And also Yehuda said in koifin. Now Rashi explains if both want, then we don't force them. Right? And Rashi throws in and says, if he wants to do yibum, and she does not want to do yibum. So Rashi goes into a lengthy thing that it has to be that they both want. But if one of them wants, if he wants and she doesn't want, so if he doesn't want, that the Torah already said, yeah, if he doesn't want to do yibum. But if she doesn't want, the amra lebeina, the amra dvarim nikarim, and she says a reason. Imatzina le'at uye, v'loima le'chaloitz la menashe titlo m'sayim zuz matina lev. So we can make him promises and fool him into it. In fact, in the halacha they say that what you could say to him, oh, you want to do yibum? Here's how do you do yibum? Put on this shoe, right? And you go through the chalitza process and say, okay. And he says, okay, so where's the yibum part? I said, too late, you already did chalitza. Yeah. So we can even trick him into that. Now, Rashi's mashma that this is only now that we say that people can't be mechavim properly. So then we're going to do this. But really, the Gemara has a limud already that we learn that she could say she doesn't want the evil. She doesn't want it. So why does Rashi have to come on to this? We already know that she could say loy ba'ina. So she has a right to say. And the Torah only says.
What if he can say, right? Also might that he told her about works, right? So what if she can say?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean she has a right to say I don't want.
What right? Like what's going to happen? We'll stop him.
Yeah.
We'll beat him up.
We'll stop him. Oh, we don't let him. He'll get malchus for doing even without mimer.
Without what?
Mimer, without kiddushin. Midarabana. Yeah, it's not the appropriate way to do it.
On the Raisa level, right? Is there, like,
on the Raisa level, that's what Gemara learns, that she has a right to say I don't want it.
Because at the Raisa level, we have to stop him. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
It's not just like a Durabon, we're going to come in and stop him.
Midoraisa, that's right.
We have to stop him.
Yeah. It works. In other words, it's effective if he does it bal karcha, but it's not meant to be bal karcha. So Tesis is chaylik on Rashi, but Rashi over here is learning that there's a dvarim nikarim, so then that's sufficient. Now the shaila is, we'll see later in the Masechta, that Abba Shaul, right? Rabbi Abba Shaul holds that there actually is no mitzvah yibum unless you mechavel l'shem mitzvah. The no mitzvah yibum unless you mechavel l'shem mitzvah. Is that the same as the Gemara is saying here? L'chara not. L'chara, this is different. This is saying in the Chachamim, not like Abba Shaul. We still have that we encourage them to do yibum, to do chalitza, not yibum, because they're not doing l'shem shemayim. So what's the chiluk? So Abba Shaul, we're going to have to say says that it actually is not a mitzvah. You're pogea, you're actually being over. It's an erva. It's an erva, and but you pogea. That's the way he says it's korivli is mamzer. It's like he holds that it's really it's an eshesach. You're not allowed to do it if you're not being mechavel l'shem shemayim. And over here, in the Chachamim, the Gemara is only saying, even though that it is a proper yibum, and even though it would be okay, it's just not the right thing. Since you're not being mechaven, so we encourage them not to do it. And therefore, Rashi says, if they both want to, so it looks like they want to do l'shem shemayim, so we're going to let them do it. That's the shita of the Chachamim. So that's the difference between the two. And l'chayra, when we get to Abba Shaul, we're going to have to ask a question, like Rabbi Yossi pointed out. The Gemara says that even if he was in the Einus, even if he was asleep, even if it was Baal Karchoi, right? Even if he was Mechavan L'Shem, Znus L'Shem, anything he does will do the yibum. So how can you Abba Shaul say? How can Abba Shaul say that? Oh, if he's not Mechavan L'Shem Shemayim, then it's not the mitzvah, and it's carved to being erva and mamzerim. We see that the mitzvah happens the mitzvah is valid or effective. I don't want to say valid. It's effective either way. If it's effective, it means why is it effective? Because that's what the Torah said. The Torah said it to do this, and then you did it, so it worked. So how can Abba Shaul say it doesn't work? So we'll see when we get to that. Let's leave it at this. The question of is that are these halachas, all the halachas of ba'inus and the kavanas nus, etc. Is that even according to Abba Shaul, or is it only according to Chachamim? And Abba Shaul is really going to be chaylik on this and that. Abba Shaul says if you machal l'shem shemayim, fine.